A massive ice jam on the Yukon River has caused major flooding in Galena, Alaska, and most of the town has been forced to evacuate. A 30-mile ice wall has even been pushed into homes along the riverbanks.
Emergency officials say it hasn't just caused flooding, but something they call ballistic ice.
You can have something form and locally start flooding instantaneously. You can have the water come up.
Many of the community's houses are even elevated to cope with the frequent flooding, but Alaska officials say this is the worst flood in the area since 1945.
Residents on Mexico's southern Pacific coast return home, surrounded by the aftermath of a devastating storm.
Hurricane Barbara has hit Mexico's southern Pacific coast, flooding roads, toppling trees and killing 2 men. A devastating start to what forecasters are predicting will be an extremely active hurricane season.
Extraordinary images caught on tape, those tornadoes hitting Oklahoma yet again. You can see the funnel cloud there off in the distance there. Just a week after we were there in Moore, Oklahoma for that destructive tornado. And now look at this tonight, the new images, the newest storms to hit. What it was like inside one of those countless cars trapped on those Oklahoma interstates. That's the debris flying in the sky right at them, straight at the driver, suddenly caught in the middle of it all.
For the past 24 hours, they've been warned to prepare for violent weather, and many did just that, holing up in storm shelters. Others tried to flee in cars, triggering a huge traffic jam.
The Weather Service says it was an EF5. That is the strongest category. It killed 19 people.
There is new proof this wild weather is producing things we have never seen before. Today, scientists announced that tornado in Oklahoma is the widest tornado ever recorded on Earth.
That's twice as wide as the Moore tornado a week and a half earlier. And the Joplin tornado that killed 158 in 2011 was only 3/4 of a mile wide. The most powerful tornadoes with winds over 200 miles an hour are called EF5s. Friday's in Oklahoma was just the 60th EF5 since 1950. And remarkably, Oklahoma had 2 in just 11 days. Powerful numbers producing deadly results, reminding us again those weather alerts are real.
Flood warnings are in effect tonight for a wide stretch of the country.
Well beyond Oklahoma, 11 states have widespread flooding, from North Dakota to Indiana to Kentucky.
Repeatedly hit the same spot with 2 or 3 inch per hour rainfalls, sometimes for many hours. Some places got 9 to 10 inches of rain.
A speed limit sign is all that remains of part of a road in the U.S. state of Oklahoma.
Huge wildfires in the west. More than 1,000 homes are now being evacuated as out-of-control fires burn in California and in New Mexico. And look at this video of a trapped man spotted by the news chopper from Los Angeles affiliate KABC.
This morning, the Powerhouse Fire is earning its name. Massive flames tearing through mountain canyons north of Los Angeles that haven't burned in 30 years.
So Melbourne City has recorded its wettest June day on record with 48.6 millimetres, and that's the wettest day since 1904, so definitely a significant amount of rainfall there. It's also the wettest day since the 12th of April 2011, and the wettest winter day since 1924.
At least 6 people have died after deadly floods in Central Europe. Emergency operations are now in place in Austria, Germany and the Czech Republic after record levels of rising water. Thousands have fled their homes, many roads are closed, and in some parts electricity has been turned off as a precaution.
The moment an earthquake measuring 6.2 on the Richter scale hits Taiwan is caught on CCTV cameras. The quake, which struck 24 miles southeast of the city of Taichung on Sunday, has so far claimed 3 lives. In these pictures broadcast on local television, people are seen running from a department store as goods are thrown from the shelves and display units collapse. Another camera shows men running down a road as the ground shakes.
In southern Somali town of Johar, hundreds of families and farmers have been displaced after a river burst its banks in Middle Shabelle region. Those highly affected are the internally displaced persons. Many villages and farms have remained underwater. The local administration says that at least 22 people have been killed due to the floods. Many of the victims are said to be young children.
Much of Central Europe remains on flood alert as heavy rains move across the Czech Republic towards Germany and Austria. In Prague, the Vltava is said to be flowing 20 times its normal rate after the authorities were forced to open several dams.
This flood, sparked by heavy rain, is being blamed for at least 11 deaths. Areas of suburban Prague in the Czech Republic are still submerged.
In the German city of Dresden, the authorities are warning the River Elbe could reach 9 meters. That's 7 above what's normal for this time of year.
Runoff means that river levels are continuing to rise. The army's been drafted in to help. The last great flood was in 2002. They're now saying that along the Elbe, this one will be even worse.
In the German city of Dresden, the authorities are warning the River Elbe could reach 9 meters. That's 7 above what's normal for this time of year.
Floodwaters are also receding. However, waters in the city located just 30 miles from the Czech border have reached their highest level in more than 5 centuries.
Cuba's western region is counting the costs after Tropical Storm Andrea dumped heavy rains over the area on Thursday, cutting off communities and leaving hundreds of homes underwater. Towns in Pinar del Rio province on the island's western end were hit hard by Andrea, reportedly dumping up to 12 inches of rain in some areas of Cuba. The season's first Atlantic tropical storm, Andrea made landfall in Florida on Thursday and is forecast to drench much of the US southeast with heavy rain as it cuts across Georgia and up the Atlantic coast.
Tropical Storm Andrea moving quickly toward the northeast, said to be a very waterlogged Friday for millions after leaving so much damage in its path.
With it, impressive numbers. In Wilmington, North Carolina, more than 5 inches of rain in just one day. That's about what they get in a month. Downpours in Raleigh, North Carolina, with more than 5 inches in less than 3 hours.
13 inches, almost 14 inches in North Miami Beach of rain. Boston picked up over 3. New York City had its second wettest June day ever with 4.16 inches of rain. Lots of records to talk about and a lot of Ventura, Florida. Look at this. They're on a bus and it's full of water. So imagine being on a public bus, people putting their feet up on the seats, trying to climb away from the water that was filling that bus.
There are people kind of freaking out and crying.
The tropical storm bringing heavy rains, over 5 inches in Manatee County, while in other areas, Doppler estimates indicate up to 9 inches of rain.
We're scared that our house is going to flood.
And their storm surge.
It did a little bit of damage. There were a couple tornadoes down there, and that'll be the threat again today.
Oh my God, Doug. You might get hit by flying debris.
This dramatic surveillance video shows how even a tropical storm can produce major trouble. One of Andrea's tornadoes ripping through this Gulfport, Florida restaurant.
May have done the most damage in Florida. 8 confirmed tornadoes and 50-mile-per-hour winds, downing trees and leaving thousands in the dark.
Tu la filmes? Où elle est?
Strong winds and heavy monsoon rains across Sri Lanka's coastal area have left 27 dead, while another 29 fishermen are still missing.
Strong winds and heavy rains batter Sri Lanka. The start of the monsoon season is producing winds of more than 100 miles or 70 kilometers per hour. The Navy and Air Force continue rescue efforts. There are at least 36 missing fishermen. At least 37 boats have disappeared. And there's little relief in sight with heavy showers expected.
At least 21 flood-related deaths have been reported in Central Europe as overflowing rivers cause extensive damage. Residents in Germany are preparing for more flooding as waters of the Elbe River remain at a dangerously high level.
The River Elbe, which runs through this city, is threatening to burst its banks. 23,000 people have had to be evacuated from their homes after streets and buildings were flooded.
A new round of severe weather moving east tonight. 18 million families in the heartland bracing for powerful winds, possible tornadoes. And we've also seen what is being called a biblical dust storm, with the roar of a freight train engulfing cars on the road.
This was the view from the driver's seat in Winnemucca, Nevada yesterday. Apocalyptic is how some drivers described it because of a sudden sandstorm. Only after the dust had cleared did the damage become visible. 27 vehicles piled up on Interstate 80 and one truck driver dead.
Tonight, we're keeping a close eye on the weather across the map. It's been a dangerous 24 hours, and forecasters are predicting a wild night and day ahead for much of the country. In fact, more than 75 million Americans are at risk of severe storm.
Good evening, Lester. This week is already off to a very active start. Last night, we saw tornadoes and flooding. In fact, plenty of flooding happening throughout parts of the Northeast, including Maryland. Tough to get around, making for very dangerous conditions. Also in parts of Nevada, dealing with some of the flooding as well. And then there were the tornadoes that went along with some of these strong storms. Several reports of tornadoes from Kentucky to Delaware and North Carolina. Some damage and injuries were reported with that.
Begin with the severe storm rolling across the nation right now. Weather experts putting out a kind of all-points bulletin. 1 in 5 Americans in the path of what could become a weather phenomenon called a derecho, a 240-mile stretch of wicked wind.
That's an extremely powerful land hurricane with winds up to 100 miles per hour.
Now to the massive weather system that spawned nearly 20 tornadoes over the past 24 hours, now moving to the east, creating a dangerous situation tonight in big metropolitan areas.
That massive storm system that swept across several states from the Midwest to the Mid-Atlantic is being blamed for 4 deaths.
Throughout the day, the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic have been in the target zone, as several lines of powerful storms with high winds took aim at the region, tossing cars and tearing apart buildings. This afternoon, dark clouds and heavy rain rolled into Washington. These storms first began popping up last night, bringing damaging winds and heavy rain. In Worth County, Iowa, a terrifying 45 minutes as firefighters worked to rescue a child and 2 adults from a submerged SUV. Without warning, the child's safety line suddenly dipped below the surface of the water.
Uprooted and hundreds of thousands were left without power after heavy rains and strong winds slammed the East Coast. On the West Coast, a rare tornado touched down in Oregon, damaging buildings and homes.
And then there's wildfires burning right now throughout parts of Colorado. And there are several of those going on right now related to the record heat and the high winds. Temperatures in the triple digits already for Denver today and for Pueblo. For Denver, that's the earliest this season to reach 100. And you're looking.
In Colorado, the most destructive wildfire in state history is now blamed for 2 deaths. The Black Forest Fire has destroyed at least 360 homes just outside Colorado Springs.
The destruction is staggering. And tonight, 2 people found dead in Colorado's most destructive wildfire ever. 41,000 people now under mandatory orders to evacuate.
Breaking news on the weather front this evening. Record rains, nearly as much rain in parts of the South in just the last few hours as they see in an entire year. Dozens of rescues underway.
Tonight, more than 60 water rescues. Dramatic flooding from Missouri to Iowa to Texas. Gushing through yards near Springfield, Missouri. Flowing water almost overtaking this SUV. As much as 9 inches of rain in southwest Missouri, falling in just 5 hours today. And look at that hail, spiky and bigger than the computer mouse. North of Des Moines, Iowa, streets were flowing with floodwaters. And south of San Antonio, Texas, creeks, ponds, and the Rio Grande River went surging through the streets this weekend. And look at those officers. They're waist-deep searching for those who are trapped. As many as 300 people spent the night in shelters. All of this after almost 17 inches of rain fell in just 36 hours. That's almost as much as the city gets in an entire year.
An incredible scene of devastation this morning. Torrential rain and flooding have washed away entire buildings, killing at least 23 people in northern India. Dozens more are missing. People are being rescued from rooftops. A landslide nearby buried a bus.
36 hours of rain took a heavy toll on the lives of locals in northern India's pilgrimage town of Uttarkashi on Sunday. The flooded Ganges River swept away houses and caused extensive losses for locals in and around Uttarkashi.
The rains usually cover all of India by mid-July, but this year it happened on June 16, the earliest such occurrence on record, a senior official at the India Meteorological Department said.
We're also getting information and videos from our citizen journalists, and here's what you're seeing. One sent by a stranded CJ Nirja in Dharasu. She shot this while she and her friends were in a car and got stuck in the floods. They've been stuck in Dharasu for over 3 days now, with food supplies fast depleting.
More than 10,000 pilgrims who were stranded along a mountain pass leading to a Hindu religious site are being evacuated by helicopter.
A rare and scary sight out west this afternoon. That would be a funnel cloud just to the east of Denver International Airport. Not the kind of thing you see every day. Luckily, it moved on away from population centers.
That's a tornado. Watch as this EF1 tornado makes a landing approach on the runways of Denver International Airport. Thousands of passengers at the terminals race to the basement and shelters as the funnel cloud nears.
The National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning.
The normally bustling concourse is eerily quiet.
Take shelter immediately.
Nearly 10,000 travelers huddled nervously in the bathrooms, waiting for the all clear, while severe thunderstorms and strong winds battered the runways.
You don't expect hot weather. Alaska, an unusual heat wave continues today. The high in Anchorage Tuesday hit 81 degrees. That breaks a record set in 1926.
The land of polar bears, sled dogs, and frozen tundra knows it's cold. But this week's record heat has left them caught off guard and headed to the beach. Record low temperatures just a month ago are now shattering heat records, including 96 degrees in Talkeetna, Alaska.
This time of the year normally brings highs in the mid-60s.
Probably the most notable is Talkeetna. That's up on the Susitna Valley, and 96 degrees, their high temperature yesterday. That was an all-time record high. Their previous record was 91 the day before. The satellite view shows an unusually cloudless sky above, and there's plenty of time to enjoy it. It stays light out 19 hours a day this time of year.
Well, visitors say it's really nice and locals say it's very dangerous, because it's going to increase, there's always like a pro and a con. So we're like, yay, the weather's great, we can get out. But also in other parts, there's going to be a lot of fires starting and a lot of glacial melt, a lot of flooding.
Recent recurrent floods and landslides triggered by heavy rain have affected over 17,000 people in northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. The weather condition has also seen major and continuous disruptions on local roads. The torrential rain, which began Friday, hit much of southern Xinjiang, including Aksu, Hotan, Kashgar, and Kyzyl-Suk Kyrgyz regions. Meanwhile, wet conditions in the worst-hit area of Aksu on Tuesday evening destroyed large stretches of farmland, stranding more than 700 farmers. Infrastructure in the region, including bridges and roads, was also damaged from the torrential rain. A local highway maintenance station staff member who has worked in the area for more than 33 years said that he has never seen so much of a flood hit the area like this before.
Amazing video from Europe where floodwaters have swamped parts of France and Spain. Intense flooding from heavy rain and melting snow sent a camper trailer floating away down a swollen river, and it forced the evacuation of thousands of people in Spain. At least 2 people in France were killed by the floods.
For the second time in a week, participants at the Swiss Federal Gymnastics Tournament in Biel in Switzerland had to flee as storm winds of 130 kilometers an hour swept through the site. Several people were injured by falling trees and trapped under debris. Heavy rainstorms in Switzerland and flooding in France continue to cause havoc.
A rare hailstorm in June has struck Switzerland's second most populous city of Geneva Thursday afternoon, causing severe losses to local vineyards and disruption to traffic.
Parts of France are on orange alert as savage storms leave a trail of destruction in their wake. The southwest region is on storm watch as the unseasonal tempest-like weather claims a third life. A 54-year-old woman drowned in her car in the Landes. Overnight, a mini tornado struck the Côte d'Or region, laying waste to 60 houses and leaving 15,000 homes without electricity. In the French Pyrenees, flash floods showed no mercy, sweeping away all in their path.
Storms buffet the coast of New Zealand Friday, bringing with them torrential rain, snow, and gusting winds that have left parts of the country in turmoil.
Thousands are still without power following the worst weather in the capital since the storm that caused the Wahine disaster in 1968. Planes, trains and buses were cancelled this morning.
The storm hit the south coast head-on, with winds gusting up to 200 kilometres an hour. It wrenched roofs from houses, left rubble and debris strewn across the road, and when paired with powerful waves, it was truly destructive. Roads were torn up, parts of the seawall destroyed.
In the last 24 hours, we've had near record snow in parts of the South Island, more than a metre at Mount Hutt, sparking an avalanche there.
Large parts of New Zealand have been battered by what's being described as a once-in-a-generation storm.
Now to the extreme weather this evening and to those winds fueling wildfires in the west. Families just returning home in parts of Colorado tonight as new fires now burn in that state and in Arizona now.
Tonight, out-of-control fires are chewing up the west. Here in Colorado, some residents are coming back to the Black Forest, finding more than 500 homes reduced to ash.
I can't even tell what the hell anything is.
Highly destructive fire seasons are becoming the new normal.
It's partly because more people are building homes like this in overgrown forests, but scientists say it's also made much worse by climate change.
Climate experts blame extreme drought and global temperatures running hotter than average every single month for 28 years straight. And research shows wildfires already burning bigger and more often, on average torching twice as much ground as 40 years ago. Plus, fire season is now 2 months longer than it used to be.
Further north in Canada, the opposite problem. Torrential rains have caused the worst flooding in decades.
Calgary, Canada's third largest city, is underwater. The unprecedented flooding in the province of Alberta has killed 3 people and driven 175,000 others from their homes. Alberta's Premier, Alison Redford.
These are flood levels and volumes like we've never seen. The speed at which they're coming is entirely different, and the impact on communities has been really tremendously tragic.
It began Thursday when record rainfall and melting snow funneled down the Canadian Rockies.
More than 5 inches of rain fell in less than 24 hours. Overflowing rivers swallowed vehicles and washed away roads. When the water rose, it rose fast, sweeping homes right from their foundation.
Part of downtown Calgary has already been evacuated. An ambulance company says one person was swept away by the flooding. In the nearby mountains, the Trans-Canada Highway is shut down because of mudslides.
Rushing waters closed the Trans-Canada Highway and forced the evacuation of all of downtown Calgary. Mass transit was shut down, and the city's NHL arena was flooded to the 10th row.
Meantime, early monsoon rains have created a crisis in northern India. Officials say more than 1,000 people have been killed in flooding and landslides that have destroyed roads, bridges, and communications. Tens of thousands are stranded or missing.
Around 50,000 people remain stranded in Uttarakhand, which has sustained heavy infrastructural damage and seen whole communities washed away. The past 5 days have seen early monsoon rain catch everyone by surprise.
For almost 2 unrelenting weeks, this has been a monsoon season like no other. Whole apartment blocks swept aside. The figures of those affected give a glimpse of how big this crisis is. The government says around 35,000 people have been rescued, but almost 20,000 remain stranded.
The Mines and Geosciences Bureau continues to study how a portion of a coastline in Candelaria, Zambales collapsed over the weekend. But the agency says it's still too early to call the incident a sinkhole.
Strange occurrence here on the East Coast. We now know that on June 13th, 30 different tide measuring gauges from North Carolina all the way north to Massachusetts showed what appears to match the definition of a tsunami.
Officials believe the 6-foot wave was a Mateo tsunami, which are caused by strong weather systems that lead to a jump in air pressure. That spike creates strong waves that mimic tsunamis.
The wave was about 6 feet tall, sweeping 3 people off the coast and injuring 2. This is the first time a tsunami has been recorded off the coast of New Jersey in 80 years. A storm system that moved across New Jersey just before the tsunami is being investigated as a possible factor.
Living around here, we've had earthquakes, Sandy and all these things lately. It seems like it's, what next?
The weather system drenching parts of New South Wales continues to bring heavy rain and the threat of floods.
Parts of the south coast have now received triple their average June rainfall in just 3 days. It bucketed down again today. Even the horses have had enough as paddocks were turned into lakes. It came up in just a few hours last night and could take a few days to clear. Another concern, coastal erosion as wild seas batter the coast.
Locals say it's a 1 in 100 year event and this just happened to be their year. Now, here in the east, we're worried about a lot of rain. Take a look at what it looked like yesterday in Pennsylvania, parts of central PA near State College. I mean, heavy rain, flash flooding. Folks had to be rescued by boat. There were streets that were inundated, turned into rivers. I mean, literally within a matter of minutes, they had to do a lot of high water rescues.
Today, and guess what? We now have the wettest June ever recorded in Philadelphia, 10.11 inches, beating the old record. We still have a couple days to go. Meanwhile, in Wilmington, there are nearly 12 inches of rain, way over the old record. 0.9 inches. That's one of the wettest months of any time of the year that we've ever seen.
A big rain-producing weather system just parked along the coastline for days, showing no signs right now of moving. It has caused flooding in rural and urban areas from the Carolinas to New England, and just today, tornado sightings and significant damage in the area around New York City.
This is the kind of heat we expect out here in late summer. Not only is this brutal heat wave hitting earlier than usual, it's expected to be the worst in a decade. Tucson was hotter than Cairo, Egypt. California's Death Valley hotter still, approaching 130 degrees.
We could see temperatures at least very close to the hottest temperatures ever recorded on Earth.
Researchers say get used to it. Alexander Gershinoff, who studies climate change at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, says Western heat waves are changing.
The new types of heat waves that are becoming increasingly frequent are humid heat waves, and with high humidity, we actually have much hotter nighttime temperatures.
Bill mentioned that the temperature in Death Valley, California was approaching 130. Well, the hottest day ever recorded on Earth was in Death Valley, almost exactly 100 years ago, July 10th, 1913. It hit 134.
On this Monday, 19 firefighters have been killed while battling a fast-moving wildfire about 85 miles northwest of Phoenix. They were part of an elite group of specially trained firefighters called Hot Shots. Officials say the crew was overtaken by the flames and had deployed their personal fire shelters in a final attempt to save themselves. It's the single worst loss of firefighters battling a wildfire since 1933.
And turning now to the weather. Heavy downpours are continuing to batter large parts of this country. 9 provinces actually and municipalities have been affected.
The severe convective weather started around 3:10 p.m. on Sunday. Some residential houses have been inundated and road traffic was severely affected.
The storm has caused 39 deaths and 13 are still missing. North China and cities in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River have also been hardest hit.
Flooding and landslides unleashed by torrential rains in southwest China's Chongqing municipality has led to 2 deaths as of Monday, according to the Ministry of Civil Affairs. In Chongqing, nearly 880,000 people have been affected and over 100,000 evacuated.
Scenes of devastation following a magnitude 6.2 earthquake that struck Indonesia on Tuesday, killing at least 22 and injuring more than 200.
They say the jolt damaged about 300 houses and buildings. 2 apparent aftershocks measuring magnitude 5 triggered landslides. Some people remain missing.
Hundreds of dead fish have been washing up on the beaches of the Mississippi Gulf Coast for the past 2 days. Mississippi officials want you to be aware, but not afraid.
Stingrays, fish, shrimp, eels, and crabs, all dead, all spread along beaches along the Mississippi Gulf Coast Tuesday. Officials say it's the 2nd day of a fish kill for the record book.
And we could see more superstorms like Sandy, along with massive wildfires, epic flooding, and drought. A new report says they could be worse than anything we've faced in 500 years. The World Meteorological Association says the last decade was the warmest ever. We saw new heat records on land and at sea. Plus, it was the wettest period in a century, with more floods and hurricanes. Professor Michio Kaku is a physicist at the City University of New York and a CBS This Morning contributor. Professor, good morning.
Morning.
How significant is this report?
This report is devastating. You know, you don't need a weatherman to know that something is terribly wrong with the weather. Everywhere I go, people say the weather's out of control. 100-year flooding, 100-year heat waves, especially in Europe, 100-year storms. And this report summarizes it all. The last decade has gone down as the hottest decade ever recorded in the history of science. You have to go back to 1850.
Waves as high as 7 meters pounded homes and businesses on Chile's coastline. The extreme conditions started on Wednesday, with weather experts warning they could last until the weekend. High winds caused the tidal surges, which have led emergency services to issue weather warnings to 11 regions in the South American country, predicting strong winds, high tides and large waves. In the city of Vina del Mar, about 120 kilometers west of the capital Santiago, the waves washed over sea defenses, flooding coastal streets and damaging homes and businesses. Seaside resorts also suffered, and one port was forced to close to all vessels. In another area, 8 homes were flooded and 32 people affected.
A lot of folks around the country found themselves dealing with extreme weather on this first day of the holiday weekend. Look at this. It seemed more like the middle of winter in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, after a storm dumped more than a foot of hail. They had to call out the snowplows. Many homes and businesses were damaged.
And here's some pictures. Take a look at the roof here, completely overtaken by the weight of the hail. Reportedly paintball-sized hail. And by the looks of these pictures, it sure does look like winter.
We are well into summer, but it sure doesn't look like it in this New Mexico town, covered in white after a storm dumps buckets of hail, leaving plenty of damage behind, too.
Along the Florida Panhandle today, heavy rain and thunderstorms caused flash flooding. In several areas, as much as 20 inches of rain has fallen since this morning. And highly dangerous rip currents forced beaches in Florida and Alabama to close.